One of the world's wealthiest men is standing at a grocery store checkout, his platinum credit card flashing red on the scanner. Declined, not once, not twice, but 3 times. The silence that followed wasn't just awkward, it was suffocating, but this wasn't about money. This wasn't about a technical glitch or a frozen account. What happened in those next 60 seconds would expose something far more sinister, lurking beneath the surface of our everyday interactions. As whispers began to ripple through the store and eyes turned toward him with confusion and judgment, nobody could have predicted what would happen next, especially not from the smallest person in that entire building, an 8-year-old girl quietly watching from aisle 3. Her response didn't just save the moment. It shattered every assumption, challenged every prejudice, and revealed a powerful truth that would change one billionaire's perspective and spark a conversation that reached millions. Some acts of courage come from the most unexpected places. Some lessons about humanity arrive through the smallest hands. And sometimes the most profound moments of clarity happen when we're forced to see ourselves through the eyes of a child. What this little girl did next wasn't just unthinkable, it was transformative, and it all started with a simple question that would echo far beyond that grocery store checkout line. Jonathan Blackwood had never worried about money. Not once in his 43 years of life. Born into old money, raised in boardrooms, and educated in the finest institutions money could buy, financial concerns were as foreign to him as poverty. His daily routine was clockwork precision: morning meetings in glass towers, afternoon calls with international investors. In these evening galas, champagne flowed like water. But on this particular Tuesday afternoon in downtown Chicago, Jonathan had decided to do something entirely out of character. Something that would have made his personal assistant, driver, and entire staff shake their heads in bewilderment. He was going grocery shopping, alone. The idea had struck him during a board meeting earlier that morning. His company was launching a new initiative focused on community outreach. Jonathan realized with uncomfortable clarity that he had no idea what ordinary people actually did with their days. When was the last time he'd walked into a regular store? When had he ever stood in a checkout line like everyone else? So there he was, walking through the automatic doors of Sullivan's grocery, a modest neighborhood store tucked between a laundromat and a small barber shop. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in that familiar grocery store glow that millions of Americans knew by heart but felt entirely alien to Jonathan. He grabbed a small cart, its squeaky wheel announcing his presence as he navigated the narrow aisles. Everything seemed smaller than he remembered from his childhood: the cereal boxes, the produce section, even the people seemed to move differently here. There was a rhythm to this place, a community pulse from which his penthouse lifestyle had insulated him entirely. Jonathan found himself genuinely curious about the experience. He picked up items he hadn't touched in decades: a loaf of bread, milk, and apples. Simple things that appeared in his kitchen as if by magic, prepared and presented by staff he rarely interacted with directly. Near aisle 3, he noticed her. A small African-American girl, maybe 8 years old, carefully counted coins in her palm. At the same time, her grandmother examined soup cans nearby. The child's concentration was absolute, her little fingers moving the quarters and dimes around, like puzzle pieces, clearly calculating something important. Jonathan smiled to himself. Something was refreshing about witnessing such focused determination in someone so young. In his world, transactions happened with the swipe of a card, the signature on a document, and the electronic transfer of numbers, which existed more as concepts than reality. He continued shopping, occasionally glancing back at the girl and her grandmother. They moved methodically through the store, the older woman checking prices, the child helping carry lighter items. It was clear they were being careful, deliberate, something Jonathan realized he hadn't seen in years among his usual social circles. After about 20 minutes, Jonathan made his way to the checkout line. He had maybe 15 items, nothing extravagant, just the basics he thought a normal person might buy. The teenage cashier looked tired, probably working after school to help his family. Jonathan felt a strange sense of satisfaction about this ordinary interaction he was about to have, but as he reached for his wallet, something felt different. The usual weight wasn't there. He patted his jacket pockets, then his pants pockets. A cold realization began to creep in his rush to experience normal life. He had left his regular wallet in his other jacket. All he had was his Platinum American Express card. The one with no preset spending limit, the one that opened doors and commanded respect in the finest establishments worldwide. Surely, he thought, this would work just fine at a neighborhood grocery store. The cashier scanned his items efficiently, and the total on the small screen was $47.83. Jonathan handed over his platinum card with the confidence of a man who had never heard the word declined in any financial context. Behind him, the line was growing. A mother with 2 small children, an older man with just a few items. And near the back, the little girl and her grandmother were still carefully organizing their modest selection of groceries. Jonathan had no idea that in the next few minutes, his understanding of the world and himself was about to be completely shattered by the most unexpected teacher he could have imagined. The first beep should have been routine. Credit cards were always declined due to technical glitches, connectivity issues, and expired cards. But when the teenage cashier ran Jonathan's Platinum American Express through the reader a second time, something shifted in the air around Register 3. The boy's expression changed subtly. Where there had been the tired efficiency of someone working an after-school job, now there was uncertainty. His eyes flicked from the card to Jonathan's face, then back to the card again. The platinum surface gleamed under the fluorescent lights, clearly premium. Clearly expensive, but the machine kept rejecting it. Jonathan felt the first flutter of anxiety in his chest, not about the money millions in his accounts, but the growing attention this small drama attracted. The woman behind him with 2 restless children had stopped organizing her purse and was now watching intently. The older man beyond her was craning his neck to see what was causing the delay. When the third attempt failed, the beep echoing through the store like an alarm, the cashier's hand hovered uncertainly over the card reader. That's when everything began to unravel. The boy called for his manager, his voice carrying further than necessary across the store. Other checkout lines began to slow as customers turned to see what was happening at Register 3. Jonathan could feel the weight of their stares, the subtle shift in energy as a routine transaction transformed into a public spectacle. From the customer service counter, Frank approached with the deliberate stride of middle management, asserting authority. His name tag caught the light as he walked. Jonathan immediately noticed Frank's expression wasn't one of helpful concern, it was suspicion wrapped in the thin veneer of customer service. Frank's examination of the card was theatrical. He held it up to the light, checking for signs of forgery with exaggerated scrutiny. He compared the name embossed on the plastic to Jonathan's face, his eyes narrowing as if trying to solve some complex puzzle. The performance was clearly intended for the growing audience of onlookers. That's when Jonathan realized what was happening. This wasn't about a technical malfunction or a banking error. This was about something far more sinister and far more personal. Frank's suspicion wasn't based on the card's behavior, but Jonathan's appearance. The manager's voice carried clearly across the store when he announced his decision. The card would be confiscated pending verification. Jonathan would need to wait while they called the credit card company to confirm that he was the legitimate card holder. Security would be notified as a precautionary measure. The words hit Jonathan like physical blows. He had never been treated as a suspected criminal in 43 years of privileged existence. He had never had his honesty questioned, his integrity doubted, his very identity called into question. But in this modest neighborhood grocery store, all of that happened because Frank couldn't reconcile Jonathan's skin color with his platinum credit card. The humiliation was unlike anything Jonathan had ever experienced. around him, other customers began to create distance, forming an invisible circle of suspicion. The mother with the children moved to another line, glancing worriedly at the situation at Register 3. Phones appeared in hands, some recording, others perhaps alerting security or law enforcement. Jonathan's expensive suit, Italian leather shoes, and gold watch none mattered. In Frank's worldview, and apparently in the worldview of many of the customers now staring at him, a black man possessing a platinum credit card could only mean one thing: fraud. The teenage cashier, clearly uncomfortable with the situation but powerless to challenge his manager's authority, announced over the store's intercom that security was needed at Register 3. The words echoed through the aisles like a public accusation, drawing even more attention to Jonathan's predicament. As he stood there, waiting for security guards to arrive and treat him like a common criminal over $47.83 worth of groceries, Jonathan felt something he had never experienced in his insulated life of wealth and privilege: complete and utter helplessness. All his money, connections, and success meant nothing in this moment. He was just another black man being viewed through the lens of prejudice and fear. Frank had looked at him and seen not a successful businessman, not a community leader, not a human being deserving of basic dignity. He had seen a threat. The rage that built inside Jonathan was unlike anything he had ever felt. It wasn't just anger at Frank's blatant racism or frustration at the situation. It was the dawning realization that this was reality for millions of people who looked like him. This humiliation, this assumption of guilt, this treatment as a second-class citizen had happened every day in stores across America to people who didn't have his resources or platform to fight back. Heavy footsteps approached from across the store as security guards responded to the call. Jonathan prepared for what felt like the longest few minutes of his life. He was about to be searched, questioned, and treated like a criminal in front of dozens of witnesses, all because Frank couldn't believe that a black man could legitimately own a platinum credit card. The injustice of it was overwhelming. But from somewhere in the crowd of onlookers, a small voice was about to shatter every assumption in that store. The cashier's hand hesitated over the card reader as the machine beeped for the third time. That sound, sharp, final, unforgiving, cut through the grocery store's ambient noise like a knife. Jonathan's platinum American Express card, the same card that had purchased private jets and opened exclusive doors worldwide, sat rejected on the counter like a piece of worthless plastic. The teenage cashier looked up with confusion and something else, something that made Jonathan's stomach drop. It was a suspicion, pure, undiluted suspicion, that transformed the boy's tired face into something more complex, more judgmental. Behind Jonathan, the line had grown restless. Whispers began to ripple backwards like a wave. He could feel eyes boring into his back, hear the subtle shift in conversations. The comfortable anonymity he had enjoyed just moments before evaporated completely. Then came the manager. A middle-aged white man with thinning hair and a permanent scowl etched into his face walked over with the deliberate stride of someone accustomed to handling problems. His name tag read Frank, and Frank was clearly unhappy about dealing with this situation. Frank examined the card with exaggerated scrutiny, holding it to the light as if checking forgeries. The gesture was theatrical, performed for the growing audience of customers who had stopped their shopping to watch this unexpected drama unfold. The humiliation hit Jonathan like a physical blow. Here he was, a man who owned buildings, employed thousands, had been featured on magazine covers, and was treated like a common criminal over $47.83. But then Frank's examination took a darker turn. His eyes moved from the card to Jonathan's face, then back to the card, then to Jonathan's expensive suit, Italian leather shoes, and gold watch. The manager's expression shifted into something Jonathan had never experienced directly but had heard about in boardroom discussions about urban demographics and security concerns. The assumption was written all over Frank's face. A black man with an expensive card could only mean one thing: fraud. theft, crime. Frank's voice carried further than necessary when he announced his decision. He wasn't just speaking to Jonathan, he was performing for the entire store, establishing his authority and control over the situation. The card was confiscated. Frank explained, with barely concealed satisfaction, that they would need to call the credit card company to verify the account. Until then, Jonathan hadn't been going anywhere. The world seemed to slow down around Jonathan as the full weight of what was happening crashed over him. He wasn't being treated as a customer with a technical problem. He wasn't given the benefit of the doubt that any other person in an expensive suit might receive. He was being criminalized, suspected, and humiliated based on nothing more than the color of his skin and Frank's assumptions about who could legitimately possess such a card. Other customers began physically distancing themselves, creating a circle of space around Jonathan as if his perceived criminality might be contagious. The mother with 2 children shepherded them to another line. The older man shook his head disapprovingly. Phones appeared, some recording, others perhaps calling security. Jonathan felt something he had never experienced in his privileged life. Complete helplessness. All his wealth, connections, and power meant nothing in this moment. He was just another black man being viewed through the lens of prejudice and fear. The teenage cashier called for security over the store's intercom system. The announcement echoed through the aisles like a public accusation, drawing even more attention to the spectacle at Register 3. Frank crossed his arms, satisfied with his handling of the situation, utterly oblivious that he was degrading one of the city's most successful business people, or perhaps he didn't care. Possibly, in Frank's worldview, no black man could legitimately possess the wealth that a platinum card represented. Jonathan's hands began to shake not from fear, but from a rage so pure and overwhelming that it threatened to consume him entirely. This was his wake-up call, his brutal introduction to a reality that millions of people faced every single day. No money, education, or success could shield him from the poisonous assumptions that still infected American society. As security guards approached from across the store, their heavy footsteps echoing against the linoleum floor, Jonathan prepared for what felt like the longest few minutes of his life. He was about to be searched, questioned, and treated like a criminal in front of dozens of witnesses, all because Frank couldn't believe that a black man could legitimately own a platinum credit card. But from somewhere in the crowd of onlookers, a small voice was about to shatter every assumption in that store and change Jonathan's life forever. The small voice that cut through the tension belonged to 8-year-old Zara. She had been watching from the back of the line with her grandmother, witnessing every moment of Jonathan's humiliation. But where others saw suspicion and assumed guilt, this child saw something entirely different. Zara walked up to the counter with the confidence that only children possess, and afraid of social boundaries, unaware that she was supposed to stay silent and burdened by the prejudices that had infected every adult in that store. She looked directly at Frank, the manager, and asked a question that would echo in Jonathan's mind for years. Why? She wanted to know, was the nice man in the suit being treated like he had done something wrong when his card was the same color as her daddy's card, the one that got declined sometimes, too, when the bank made mistakes? Her innocence pierced through the assumption and bigotry like a laser. Frank's face flushed red as he realized that dozens of customers, many now recording on their phones, had witnessed an 8-year-old child demonstrate more wisdom and humanity than he had. But Zara wasn't finished. She walked over to Jonathan, looked up at him with eyes full of genuine concern, and did something that brought tears to his eyes. She offered him the crumpled dollar bills and coins she had been carefully counting earlier, her allowance money that she had been saving for something special. The gesture wasn't about the money. It was about seeing Jonathan as a human being worthy of dignity and help, rather than a suspect deserving of suspicion. In that moment, a child's pure heart revealed the ugly truth about every adult's response to the situation. The store fell silent. Frank, faced with the moral clarity of a child and the growing awareness of his own prejudice, quietly processed Jonathan's card payment, which, of course, went through perfectly. No apology was offered, but none was expected. The damage had already been done, and more importantly, the lesson had already been learned. Jonathan left Sullivan's grocery that day fundamentally changed. The man who had entered seeking a simple glimpse into ordinary life had instead received a brutal education in the reality that millions of Black Americans navigate daily. Wealth hadn't protected him, success hadn't shielded him. Education hadn't exempted him. In Frank's eyes, he had been guilty of being Black, possessing something valuable land that was crime enough, but Zara's intervention had shown him something equally powerful, that prejudice isn't natural, it's learned. Children don't see color as an indicator of criminality. They don't make assumptions about who deserves dignity and who deserves suspicion. They see human beings in need of help. Jonathan's experience at Sullivan's grocery became a turning point in his personal understanding and business philosophy. He restructured his company's community outreach programs, investing millions in educational initiatives that taught children about implicit bias and racial justice. He funded training programs for retail workers, focusing on unconscious prejudice and its impact on customer interactions. Most importantly, he never forgot Zara's lesson. Sometimes the most profound wisdom comes from the smallest voices, and that change begins with seeing each other's humanity rather than each other's differences. The incident at Sullivan's grocery wasn't unique. It wasn't extraordinary. It was, tragically, ordinary. Every day, in stores across America, Black customers face similar assumptions, similar suspicions, similar humiliations. The only difference was that Jonathan had the platform and resources to turn his experience into meaningful change. But here's the uncomfortable truth that Jonathan's story forces us to confront. If a wealthy, successful businessman can be treated as a criminal simply because of his skin color, what does that say about the experiences of those without his privileges? If platinum cards and expensive suits can't protect against racial prejudice, what hope do ordinary people have? The answer lies not in wealth or status, but in the same place Zara found it, in our fundamental recognition of each other's humanity, in our willingness to question our assumptions, challenge our biases, and see beyond the superficial differences that divide us. Jonathan's card was declined that day, but his eyes were opened. Frank's prejudice was exposed, but Zara's wisdom was revealed. And in that small grocery store in Chicago, an 8-year-old girl reminded us all that dignity isn't determined by the color of your skin or the balance in your bank account. It's a birthright that belongs to every human being. The question remains, how many more Jonathans will face humiliation before we all learn what Zara already knew? How many more children will have to teach adults about humanity? And when will we finally realize that the content of our character matters infinitely more than the color of our skin? The choice, like always, is ours to make. What did you think of Zara's response? Have you witnessed similar situations? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories that matter. Together, we can build a world where everyone is treated with the dignity they deserve.